Book review. Shooting straight. Lt Gen Nanavattys' inspiring biography in turbulent times, stitching together a narrative through painstaking research. The author traces Lt Gen Rustam Nanavattys' journey alongside that of the Indian Army from the fall of 1962 to the years of its evolution through wars, insurgencies, and learnings. Author Arjun Subramaniam calls his new book Shooting Straight the toughest one he has written to date. What emerges though is a seamless, captivating journey of Lt Gen Rustam Nanavaty, a distinguished military leader in modern India. Lt Gen Nanavaty's career spanned an important time in the country's recent history, from the India-China conflict of 1962 to the insurgencies of northeast India and Kashmir. In his introduction to the book, Subramaniam reminds us that objective biographies of military leaders, especially those whose careers reached a pinnacle in the 1980s and 1990s, are rare, which makes Lt Gen Nanavaty's story both relevant and unusual. Rustam's father had wanted to join the army during the World War but had to eventually settle for the police force. The book tells us that Kushrau's life and traits influenced his son's personality while growing up. Through his instinctive love for the army, he appeared to have fulfilled his father's dream of joining the army. The book traces the early years of young Rustam, nicknamed Rusty in school, and his time of training at the Indian Military Academy before joining his battalion towards the end of the 1962 war. One marvels at the specific nuances brought out in the narratives, which include names of people, dates, places, and instances in anecdotes stretching back over 60 years. This is a testament to the meticulous notes that the protagonist had compiled over the years and the impeccable narrative skills of Subramaniam that bring alive the book for the reader. The book unearths gems such as letters and notes written by Lt Gen Nanavaty during his career and preserved carefully by him. The most striking is the letter written by a young Second Lieutenant Nanavaty after the 1962 India-China War, where he was candid and unsparing in his criticism of the senior army leadership over their performance. While the brigade major was not too pleased by the letter, his brigade commander took note of his prowess for articulation of his observations and lent valuable suggestions to the young man. This letter is a metaphorical beginning of his journey about speaking the truth. Subramaniam, in his book, brings out several instances where the protagonist was fearless, conscientious, and consistent to the truth while dealing with adverse situations or dilemmas. Through his career, Lt Gen Nanavaty took notes from his stints at various institutions and places. For instance, he gained from his experience with the Americans and their understanding of combat and war at Fort Benning, while at the British School of Infantry at Warminster. He learned about their approach to the insurgency and guerrilla tactics of the Irish Republican Army. He was drawn towards infantry tactics but never lost a chance to add to his repertoire of military knowledge. A stint as a brigade major in an armored brigade helped him gain a closer know-how of mechanized warfare. Subramaniam reflects on how the general's views were shaped by his experiences as an infantry soldier and a thinking leader in whose lexicon, victory was measured by the foot. The author tells us how he faced adverse situations but managed to turn them around. For instance, the command tenure of his Gorkha battalion began ominously as 2 soldiers died from drowning during the conduct of watermanship training. Despite the court of inquiry blaming the persons in charge, Lt Gen Nanavaty took the responsibility of these deaths and promised a turnaround, which he did in due course. A few weeks later, at a watermanship training routine, his Gorkhas, not reputed to be natural swimmers, had trained diligently to successfully negotiate a broad and rough canal in full gear on rafts, leaving the brigade commander stupefied about their newfound confidence. Subramaniam does not flinch from bringing out self-effacing instances from the general's layer of stories. Like the tenure in Sri Lanka, where the para-commando units were initially skeptical of his role as commander but grew to respect his systems-driven approach and meticulous eye for detail. He accompanied the para-commandos on some of their missions to observe, from up close, their tactics. It helped that he maintained superb fitness, though much older to the young commandos. It did not take long for them to acknowledge him as their leader. While narrating the story of the general, the book gathers curious shards of anecdotes along the way. Like the story of his subedar Major Bajar Bahadur Gurung, whose father served with the same Gorkha battalion in World War I, fighting in Flanders and France, while Bajar's son Chitra Bahadur Gurung, commissioned from Indian Military Academy, went on to become a lieutenant general in the Nepal Army. 3 generations, 3 armies, 3 countries in one family. Among the several anecdotes is an interesting incident where Lt Gen Nanavaty gets posted as aide-de-camp to General Sam Manekshaw, which the young officer turns down. There is also one involving him and Union Minister George Fernandez, and the two got along well after discovering an amusing backstory involving their family. Subramaniam's forte lies in his sincerity to the book while dissecting the general's traits of leadership. The storytelling in the book is made richer by its starkness that doesn't veer away from objectivity. He sets out to tell the story of a celebrated general, and the writing succeeds in steering away from hagiographical adulation, which makes the book a credible find in the shelf of military biographies that sometimes lack courage. There is criticism in certain quarters on Lt Gen Nanavaty about his unreasonable focus on the tactical side, while ignoring strategic thinking. The book mentions how he was more involved in the here and now. A former general shares his view that he was better suited for positional warfare than innovation and big-picture thinking, which should have been the priority for a senior military leader. However, on the other side, General Sundarji seemed to find value in Nanavaty's independent thinking. Lt Gen Mohan Pandey, who served with him, talks about his demonstrated performance in complex situations as a measure of his professional competence. In fact, the horrific Kaluchuk incident in 2002, when a bus full of citizens, including family and children of armed forces personnel, were killed by terrorists, might have evoked a knee-jerk reaction from a lesser, trigger-happy leader. Instead, he patiently waited and moved several formations into the area to prepare them for a retaliatory action against Pakistani infiltrators. He was the one who encouraged the capture of the post of Balwan, which overlooks the Gultari Valley, from Pakistan. Also, Lt. Gen. Nanavatti believed in addressing the issue of insurgency in a wholesome manner and felt that insurgency was not about eliminating militants alone but in addressing the larger issues as well. His sense of justice and fairness while dealing with complex situations stand out in the book. Stitching together a narrative through painstaking research that involved conducting more than 100 interviews and poring over several documents, the author, who is among India's distinguished military historians, traces Lt. Gen. Nanavatty's journey alongside that of the Indian Army from the fall of 1962 to the years of its evolution through wars, insurgencies, and learnings. The Indian soldier has never gained respite from the travails of insurgencies and conflicts. With such a history, the country needs more leaders in the line of Lt. Gen. Nanavatti, who are adept at reading the ground well and connect with soldiers and officers more easily than most. This book makes for essential reading for military and corporate leaders alike, who are faced with nebulous issues and contemporary dilemmas in uncertain times. Shooting Straight is a fine addition to Subramaniam's oeuvre of works, though a departure from his earlier, well-received magnum opus that covered the history of the army over a century. As Lt. Gen. Nanavatty's batchmate Brigadier Shamsher Singh puts it, Shooting Straight is an apt title since he was the best shot with the rifle. The book combines spare prose with a direct account, much like its underpinned message speaking truth to power. The writer is the author of Watershed 1967, India's Forgotten Victory over China, and Camouflaged Forgotten Stories from Battlefields. Views expressed in the above piece are personal and solely that of the author. They do not necessarily reflect News 18's views. Tweets Turbulent.